I think we need to have a little chat here. Obviously, last week was a very difficult week for all of us. The events that transpired, the continued venom that we see coming from the Democrats and Rhino Republicans is about as repugnant as it gets, nauseatingly despairing. And it soon became quite apparent to me that it was a week that shattered, for many of you, it shattered, or perhaps at the very least, it shocked your confidence that a new conservative age is rising. And I'm not talking about the mocking comments we got from obvious bots, from pathetically obvious leftist trolls that were trying to inflame despair and despondency with their disparaging comments, which were all copied and pasted, by the way. It was really actually pretty silly. No. This is from talking with many of you personally, particularly those of you in our Insiders Club, our Insiders Club members. We had a really tearful live Q&A last Thursday night with hundreds of you. And on top of that, we had our virtual conference this past Saturday. Several hundred of you attended. We had a great time. Senator Doug Mastriano was with us. He was absolutely wonderful. We literally had just gotten off the phone with President Trump just prior to our conference. And so his insights into where we're going from here were absolutely amazing. But it was very clear that, frankly, if not for most of us, it seems like our whole world has just fallen apart. It looks like Trump's legacy is in absolute tatters at the moment. It's not, but regardless. Republicans are calling on him to resign. Big tech is deplatforming everyone. It's just a nightmare. Now, having acknowledged that, I think the biggest mistake we can make is to think that the rise of a new conservative age is somehow a walk in the park. Some people seem to think that it involves the Democrats never ever winning elections again. All we do is just win. That's it. There's nothing else but winning. But that's not what it's ever meant. The rise of a new conservative age, and we've always maintained this, is actually a massive clash between globalism and nationalism, between elitism and populism, and secularism versus traditionalism. And sometimes in that clash, sometimes we're going to lose. The empire is going to strike back. And that's what we're experiencing right now, at least at this point, it seems. And it's for the first time in 4 years. This is actually very similar to what happened in Italy of late. Early on in our videos, we tracked the rise of Matteo Salvini, the nationalist populist leader of the Lega Party. And back then, he was just garnering about 5% of the support. But because of the trends moving Europe to the right, we believe that Lega was going to rise to be the most popular party of them all in Italy, which is precisely what happened. Salvini rose to 40% approval, which is huge in a multi-party system in Italy. And we saw this. We saw it personally. Remember, I posted a video of when I was in Italy with Salvini and how he was mobbed by that crowd in Verona like he was this rock star. And then he tried to seize more power, and the political establishment took him out. Just like, in effect, what we're seeing with Trump. And he and his party have fallen to about 20% approval. He's out of power, and in many ways, he's experienced what we're experiencing. And all seemed lost. And yet, when I was in Verona, I think this is back in 2019, there was another rising star that I saw named Giorgia Meloni. Now, she's the leader of the Brothers of Italy. And at that time, they were getting about 8% support in their last election. She was absolutely amazing. She rocked the roof off the place. I never saw anyone speak like she did. Well, guess what? According to the British Independent, the paper there, the Brothers of Italy have since quadrupled their support. They are now the #1 right-wing party in Italy. And guess what? They're even more conservative than Lega. That's the pattern that we've been seeing in Europe. We're seeing a rise of nationalist populism, and then oftentimes an agony of defeat, and then a massive reawakening, a rise again with even stronger conservatives. The trend that scholars are seeing today is that globalism is in its last gasps. It's dying because of this massive backlash of nationalism, populism, and traditionalism going on all over the world. But sometimes when an animal is dying, that's when it's most vicious. And it's not me saying this. This is post-secular scholarship that I share with you to interpret the world's events, our political events. And no one's saying that it's going to be easy or a walk in the park without bitter defeats. Now, what I want to do for you in this video is I want to remind you of where we've been over these last 4 years. In the midst of so many who have decided to embrace despondent and defeatist doomsaying, which, by the way, is acting just like a liberal, a leftist liberal. They're the ones that have the temper tantrums and wet their pants and weep and gnash their teeth when things don't go their way. It's conservatives that are the adults. We're bold, we're visionary, we're innovative, always hopeful that the best and brightest days are before us. But in the midst of those who, in their need to lash out, have called the integrity of this channel into question, and in the midst of any propensity we might have to despair in these turbulent times, I want to reframe what's going on right now with this election in light of where we've come over these last 4 years, because I frankly think some of us need a very loving, yet a very harsh slap back to reality. Now, if you were to load up our oldest videos, we started on November 1st, 2016, officially. I posted 7 videos in a row, each day leading up to the election, making a sustained argument of why I believe Donald Trump was going to win the presidency on November the 8th. And the argument was that the very post-globalist trends that successfully carried the Brexit referendum back in June of that year to victory, those trends were going to provide the basic frame of reference for why Trump was going to win. And I put that together in my book, President Trump and Our Post-Secular Future. Now, of course, Trump went on to win. We called it right. We had fun gloating over that in the next several videos, but it obviously didn't stop there. Among the videos that we put up over the course of the few weeks after that election was entitled The Rise of the European Right. It was posted on December 5th, 2016. It currently has 228 views. It was right at the beginning of our channel. And in that video, I said, and I quote, "We've now had 4 elections in Europe since Trump's victory on November 8th, and we now have a good idea of the extent to which what I've been calling the Brexit blowback, which I argued propelled Trump to victory, is currently sweeping across the European continent," close quote. Now, I've been absolutely consistent, relentlessly consistent in how we've analyzed current events in light of conservative trends. So I went on to talk about how in 3 of those 4 elections, we saw clear, unambiguous victories for the nationalist populist right. And then we followed very closely the presidential election in France. And we observed that the center-left and center-right parties in France that had been ruling uninterrupted for 30 years had completely collapsed. And now it was a race between the globalist Macron and the nationalist Marine Le Pen. Now again, this is in fully keeping with the thesis of this channel that the old politics of the 20th century were collapsing, a politics that tended to revolve around ideology and economics, and a new politics centered on identity was rising, a politics of nationalism versus globalism, the people versus the political class. That was the politics of the 21st century, and that's precisely what we saw in France and continue to see as we enter into 2022, their next presidential election. It looks more and more like it's going to be once again Macron versus Marine Le Pen. And although Macron won in 2017, Marine Le Pen doubled her support from the previous election. Again, the trajectory was moving in our direction. We next followed the rise of the AfD, the Nationalist Populist Alternative for Germany, that stormed the German parliament in 2017, where they got 13% of the vote, which is very high again for a multi-party system like Germany. They got 13% in their very first election when they were barely 4 years old, their first national election. And we predicted that this was just the beginning. This national election was just the beginning for the AfD, precisely because the AfD is the kind of party that rises up when the new politics is one of identity and nation and culture, as over and against the anti-cultural processes of globalization and its secular aristocracy. And that's exactly what happened. The AfD went on to storm state parliaments like places like Brandenburg and Saxony and Thuringia and Bavaria. Around the same time, we were tracking with the elections in Italy. Italy for decades had been dominated either by the center-left or the center-right, but we noticed that political paradigm was collapsing, and it was being replaced by a populist left party called Five Star on the one hand, but even more significantly, and the rise of a nationalist populist right party called, as we mentioned, Lega, led by Matteo Salvini. We followed that upcoming election in March of 2018. We saw how Lega had stormed the mayoral elections and local elections just a few months prior, and we predicted that they were going to win well, at least get in the high echelons, and they did. They assumed power with Five Star. Then the midterms here in the United States. I said we would have no blue wave, and we could actually expect the GOP to make gains in the Senate, which they did. Trump was only the fifth president in our history whose party gained seats in the Senate during a midterm. We could go on and on. We followed the rise of Thierry Baudet in the Netherlands, who shocked the world in one of his latest victories. The Vox party in Spain. We featured Vox when they were 1% approval. And we said, you better keep your eye on Vox. And in a matter of a few months, they stormed into the Andalusia parliament with almost the same percentage of the vote that the AfD got in Germany, 13%. We talked about the rise of Vlaams Belang in Belgium. We followed and called correctly the European Parliament elections in May of 2019. We followed the whole Brexit saga and predicted that Nigel Farage's Brexit party would decimate the Tories in the European Parliament elections, even though they were just 6 weeks old, which they did. 1 in 3 Brits voted for the Brexit party. And we predicted that a renewed pro-Brexit Tory party would win a landslide victory in their national elections in December that year, which they did, one of the biggest landslide victories in 60 years in Britain. We tracked the rise of the Sweden Democrats. We saw them rise from 7% support upwards to 20% support. We saw the Law and Justice Party in Poland and Viktor Orban in Hungary win back-to-back landslide victories. We tracked with the BJP party, the Bharatiya Janata Party in India, the largest democratic party in the world, which is a thoroughly right-wing Hindu nationalist party, win their second landslide victory in a row, the first party in India ever to do that. We followed the rise of Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. We watched him win a landslide victory, as well as nationalist populists like Ivan Duque in Colombia, landslide nationalist populist victories in places like El Salvador, Paraguay. We could go on and on and on. And when it came to this election here in the States, of course, we followed it daily. We predicted President Trump would win in a landslide despite, keep that in mind, despite a media polling monolith that predicted he would be crushed by Biden upwards by 14 points. We consistently maintained that Trump would win with significantly more votes than he got in 2016. And what happened? He got 11 million more votes in 2020, the third largest increase for any president seeking re-election in American history, along with the highest percentage minority support for any Republican since 1960. Now, I think we all know why that didn't work out. But for anyone to call into question the analytical integrity of this channel and the absolutely undeniable evidence that so much of the world is turning to the political and cultural right simply because we here in the United States happen to lose an election is the epitome of self-centered narrow-mindedness. It is appalling to me. I'm sorry. I have to be honest here. It is absolutely appalling to me that after what we've been through over these last 4 years, that so many would allow one election in one country to so easily demolish and devastate your confidence that a new conservative age is rising. Age, not America, age. I'm sorry, America is not the world. You may not want to hear that. But I have to point out the obvious, that America could screw up royally while the rest of the world gets it. And it's looking more and more like that's the case. America may have lost, but these 4 years have proven a conservative age has not. Even left-wing scholars are admitting the world is becoming more and more conservative. And that's going to be the hope that carries us through these turbulent and tumultuous times. The foundations of globalism have collapsed. A new conservative age is rising all around us. The days of the nationalist populist revolt against the globalist empire, both here and around the world, have indeed just begun. Keep the hope in these turbulent times. That's what's going to get us through. And we ain't seen nothing yet. God bless.